Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Housing Digital's Customer Experience Digitisation Masterclass. My name is Joe Broon, Managing Director of Housing Digital, and it's great to have so many of you joining us today. Over the next 2 hours, we'll be exploring how housing providers are using technology, data, and AI to improve customer experience, not simply to just reduce costs, but to build better services and stronger relationships with residents. We have 3 fantastic case studies from organisations taking very different approaches, but all with one thing in common: putting the customer at the centre of digital transformation. Throughout the session, please feel free to post questions in the chat. We will have a dedicated Q&A session after each presentation, as well as an opportunity to ask the panel more questions at the end as well. Our second keynote comes from Steve Love, who's Performance and Insight Manager at Accent Group. Steve specialises in using data and insights to improve services and has been exploring one of the most exciting emerging applications of AI within housing. Today, he'll be showing how Accent has used large language models and digital twins to test ideas, understand customer perspectives, and shape future services. Steve, over to you.
So lovely to be with everyone this afternoon. So I'm Steve Love from Accent Group, and as Joe's just given me a lovely intro there, kind of performance and insights. And one of the things that we've been recently looking at is kind of this new technology around kind of digital twins and how we can potentially use that to help us when it comes to customer engagement. So I'll try and share my screen. So like I was saying, it's a case study that we've done very recently. We're still in the process of kind of finalising this and kind of going on to the next steps, which I'll go through in terms of as the slides progress. But just from the offset, I just want to kind of put out there, we're by no means an expert in this space. It's something we've kind of gone into kind of open eyes, willing to learn, and hopefully just kind of share that with the sector as we kind of move through, carrying on hopefully using this as the months progress. So just going to go on to the next slide. So probably a good starting point would be to go through, what is a digital twin? So before I go into the actual specific work that we used it for, it's probably quite good to kind of start off with, where did digital twins start and what are they? Well, they've been around for probably around 24 years. It's about 2002 when the concept of using digital twins kind of came out, and it was originated really in the kind of manufacturing and aerospace industry. If you think of companies such as like Rolls-Royce using kind of digital 3D models to replicate kind of jet engines, and using those models to kind of predict failure before it actually happened. And then moving forward to the 2010s, the same technology has then been used to model smart cities and even things like energy grids. I think where the big changes have come in with this particular technology is over recent years with the advancements in AI technologies, particularly the large language models that we're now also familiar with. And we can now do a very similar thing using those same principles to not just create 3D environments or objects, but actually synthetic humans. So by doing that, we can create AI replicas of customers, communities, and audiences. And that is really what this project was really about. So just on screen here is just to give you again that kind of grounding. That is the traditional kind of digital twins that we were very, very much used to over the past 24 years. So what does it actually mean to apply digital twin thinking to people using today's AI? Well, the core idea is this really: the large language models are essentially trained on vast amounts of human generated text, which means they can simulate how different types of people think, respond, and decide. And if we feed them with demographic and attitudinal data, particularly specific groups, things like age, income, people's different housing situations, values, they in essence can become synthetic respondents based on all that information that we're putting in there. And once generated, we can run research questions through them in effect hours, rather than what would traditionally take maybe weeks. Now, in terms of this process, there are kind of 4 key stages really. The first one is defining the persona. We then need to build it into an actual model, and then we need to actually run the research. And the real important part really is that last step, which is we've got to really as well validate the outputs. And in terms of the project that we did, we went through all of these in our proof of concept. Now, I guess the elephant in the room, how can we be confident in that output? You know, how reliable is this? And the approach that we used isn't based on the AI just telling us what it thinks we want to hear. So each digital twin is built from a real person, and the company that we work with or have worked with on this particular proof of concept create those personas based off a real questionnaire that we do. It's 100 plus questions that we go out and survey real people about their life habits and behaviors. And it's that questionnaire that in essence creates a digital version of that person. Any twin that matches below 90% accuracy is then excluded from the model. Now, an independent study that was validated by Mars, that they did this across 10 projects in 7 countries, found 90% overall correlation with actual real audiences and a 93% on emotional resonance. So just looking at the PowerPoint slide there, you'll recognize probably some of those organizations that are already using this technology, Mars being one that I've just mentioned. But, some real big players there, Sony Pictures, Domino's, Samsung, Auto Trader, just to literally name a few. So I just wanted to kind of put it out there that this isn't kind of fringe technology anymore. It is being used by serious enterprises and at scale. So like any methodology and technology, there are genuine strengths and limitations. And I think it's really, beneficial that we're actually honest about both of those. So in terms of the benefits, we've got the speed at which we can do this, the scale and the cost, and the ability to actually test sensitive topics safely can all be done using this technology. But also things that we do need to consider, digital twins can only be as good as the data that they're built from. So if there's bias in the training data, that's going to flow straight into the outputs. And I think as well, what's really key to mention is transparency with our stakeholders. That's really, really critical. And we can't treat synthetic respondents as a secret shortcut either. And the key message really that I want to kind of underpin all of this is that digital twins shouldn't replace humans. It shouldn't replace the human insight. What they can do and what they are good for is being able to transform quick ideas, and hopefully enable us to access some of the insights at a faster rate. So what was our challenge? Why did we look at this in the first place? Well, just recently, I say recently, probably over the last year, we've set up some regional groups to kind of bolster our customer engagement. And we found that actually our customers living in the north of England were really struggling to engage with us. So we kind of hit a wall quite quickly. Customers were signing up in our northern groups, but they weren't showing up. We were investing significant time, resource, energy, with very low attendance, and the voices that we really wanted to hear from most in those regions, in effect, going unheard. So that gap between effort and engagement was really the kind of the prompt for us to look at different ways that we could maybe bridge that gap. So our approach then. So our approach, I think, as I said at the very beginning of this presentation, was deliberately exploratory. We went in curious, but not certain. And we worked or buddied up with a company called iLargo, and they offered us a free proof of concept using their platform. We had a clear question: could digital twins give us a credible alternative channel to hear from customers who weren't engaging with us? We chose our newly co-designed customer charter as the stimulus for this particular proof of concept. So it's a live document that generally really matters to us and to customers. And we put synthetic personas representing the northeast and northwest profiles through a structured set of questions. So we had probably around about 500 personas that were generated for this particular project. In terms of the makeup of those personas, they matched our actual kind of demographic profile that we had on record, so around about 62% single, roughly equally split by gender, aged between 18 and over 50s, and again, focused on Northeast and Northwest. So these weren't just a generic kind of average customer archetype. They were specific to the people or our customers that we were failing to reach. So this is the charter that we tested. Within the charter, we've got 7 commitments covering things from respect and listening, communication, community safety, responsiveness, repairs, home safety and complaints, things that we in the sector are all very familiar with. And we wanted to know, does this charter land? Does it feel credible? Does it reflect, what customers actually need and want? So we structured this research with the twins around 6 kind of questions, really. We wanted to know the commitments in the charter, which ones did, out of that charter felt more important, and why was that? Which is the commitment that is maybe the most hardest to believe will be delivered? Were we missing anything? Have we missed anything from the charter? The language that we've actually got in that charter, does it work? And how would we know if we were keeping these promises? How would customers know that we were keeping up to these promises? And does the community section that we popped in the charter feel real, or does it feel still a bit disconnected? So we wanted these not to be just abstract questions. They were designed deliberately to try and stress test the charter in a structured, comparable way across all of these 500 personas. So the results, and they're actually quite striking and probably in some ways a little bit uncomfortable. So let's just take the positives first. So on the positives, the commitments around dignity, listening, and co-design genuinely resonated. Repairs first time and on time was described, and I'll quote from one of the twins, life-changing in terms of reducing daily stress, but skepticism was the dominant response overall. Nearly all respondents doubted the commitments would be delivered based on their synthetic lived experience of broken promises. 90% found the language too corporate and formal, written more for management and not for customers or residents. And 74% noted that the cost of living pressures that are here were completely absent from the charter, which was a considerable gap. We also asked what customers would want as proof of delivery, and the answer that they gave was actually quite clear and practical. So they wanted repairs sorted without chasing, proactive updates via WhatsApp or text, and publicly available performance data, and genuine tenant stories easily shared. And if commitments were broken, and this is probably quite controversial, but this was the response that we got. They wanted or expected automatic compensation, ideally off rent, and a simple escalation route and public acknowledgement of failures. No forms to fill in, and small or no call queues. So here are just kind of like the headline kind of results around the questions that we asked. So if we delivered though on every commitment, we wanted to know, how would customers feel? What would be the impact? So we asked them this one final question. If we did deliver on every single commitment, what would be the single biggest difference to your life? Well, 66% said less stress, freedom from the daily weight of chasing and firefighting housing issues. 38% said more time for work, family and personal goals. And 26% said feeling respected and part of a community, something they described as actually being quite transformative. And 16% said hope for the future, the stability to plan ahead, even to save toward home ownership. So we could see from these responses what good service delivery actually means to customers, not just box ticking or targets, but mental and financial headspace to focus on work, family, and the future. So validating the results. Now, obviously, the challenge really is, how do we know that the synthetic personas are actually telling us anything that's real, that they're not hallucinating, or telling us something that it thinks we want to hear? So we went about testing it. So we took the answers from the twins that they gave us on the chart, and we actually put the same questions to real customers and asked them whether they agreed. And again, the results were striking. 5 of the 8 questions, agreement was above 85%. When the twins told us that respect and being listened to mattered most, 87% of real customers agreed. And when they said first-time repairs feels the furthest from current experience, and that delivering the charter would mean peace of mind and less time chasing, real customers agreed on this in terms of 96%. Even the lower scores were useful. So the 61% on tone and language tells us the twins are actually slightly more critical of the charter's wording than real customers were, which is, it's the calibration insight that we need. It shows that where synthetic voices might actually lean and where we might have to maybe weight certain questions accordingly. I think the takeaway isn't that digital twins replace listening to real customers. It's that they give us a fast, low-cost early read that real customers then substantially then confirm. That means we can use them with confidence to pressure test further decisions before we invest in full-scale engagement and validate the ones that do matter. So what are we going to do with this? What's Accent going to do with this next? Well, we've distilled it into 5 clear actions. 1, we're going to go away and we're going to rewrite in plain English using real tenant voices. We're going to replace vague community wording with specific local commitments, things around ASB, lighting, neighbourhood support. 3, we're going to acknowledge the cost of living directly and signpost where there is practical help. We're going to build proof into the charter as well, the you said we did stories, real testimonials, and the before and after evidence. And just on that, in terms of the you said we did, we're going to try and go down a model of you said we did you feel approach to really make it iterative. And 5, make accountability automatic. Look into whether there is potential for compensation for miscommitments. Try and make escalation as simple as possible, and also be able to kind of have transparency in terms of reporting that. 68% said evidence of delivery would build trust, and that is really a significant lever. So in terms of what we learned and reflections, so there's 2 sets of reflections here. On the method itself, the speed and the depth of insight generally did surprise us. Research that would take typically months was actually done in days, and the personas themselves felt credible and regionally specific. But questions did have to be stimulus focused. You only get back what you put in. And validation against real customer data remains essential in all of this. On the charter itself, its ambition landed, and being able to co-design it gave it credibility. But the language that was used was a real barrier, and the cost of living came out as being something that's non-negotiable. And community commitments need to become specific and local, not aspirational and vague. So just finally then, to kind of wrap up where we are now and where we go next with this. We're putting the findings to work on the charter itself. The findings will continue to feed into the ongoing review of the charter moving forward. We're also already now looking at where else this can add value. We've got 2 actual examples that we're going to implement this to next. We want to test this against our new corporate strategy, against the twins, so we can understand how it lands with customer views before we then take it to real customers for feedback. And we're also going to use the twins to assess our website, asking whether it's user-friendly, easy to understand, and simple for customers to find what they need. Thirdly, we're going to continue to share this work as it evolves across with the sector, as we continue to test and use this technology. We're early in this journey, as I've already mentioned, and we genuinely believe that open sharing helps the sector as a whole. So if anyone does want to talk about this and our approach, the pitfalls that we've found, or just talk about this in more detail, please do get in touch. Reach out to me via my email, so stephen.love@accentgroup.org, or you can find me on LinkedIn as well. More than happy to have a further call with anybody, or even deliver this same presentation to people's HAs or where you work. In terms of my final thoughts then, so we're all operating in an environment where resources are obviously tighter and value for money under more scrutiny than ever. And synthetic personas can give us a real repeatable, low-cost way to bring customer voices in early and stress test our decision making before we spend time and money going down a potential wrong path. So just to finish on this particular sentence, I'll say technology where we can, but human where we should. And that's the end of my presentation.
Brilliant. Thank you, Stephen. Yeah, I'll be honest, mind blown a bit there. Some really, really interesting stuff. I think there's already a couple of hands raised and a couple of questions coming through, but I think my first question, and apologies if I missed this in the presentation, but those digital twins were built from a survey of 100+ questions, yeah?
Yeah, that's correct.
How many residents did you get to complete a survey with 100+ questions?
Yeah, great question. So there's different providers out there that offer this particular technology, and we spoke to quite a few. But as I mentioned there about budget constraints, we did go with the one that offered us a free kind of trial. And the way in which it works is the company is actually a traditional market research company, and they're going out and doing surveys all the time. So we asked them to go out and do this regionally specific, obviously in Northeast and West. It wasn't specific customers to us that they actually produced the personas on, but people up in the Northeast and Northwest. And I think where this can become more powerful is we have the opportunity to actually overlay our own personal data with that. And I think that's where this does become really powerful. So we've already had a presentation already today about collecting that customer data and ensuring that our customer data is up to date as best as possible. For me, that's where the true value comes into this, where we can start overlaying the specifics that we do know about our existing customers. That's where I think the personas become again more real and more live.
So could you extend that and say, if you've got, let's say, overlay your data with a consensus of people generally in that region, could you extend that to a point whereby, I mean, that's fascinating itself, in my opinion, like that survey of in order to generate a virtual twin of a person is fascinating itself. And I just wonder whether, how accurate that is, but also how much of a psychometric test is that to become not just predicting what they're gonna, not predicting, but synthesizing what that digital twin would want in a certain service, but also predicting something from that data. If that makes sense. So if the question's not there, the AI's got enough of an understanding of that personality type to be able to accurately predict what they would want from something else.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's where for me that's where it's fascinating. Yeah, it's in terms of the questions themselves, being able to create, like you say, a persona that can react to maybe stimuli that maybe wasn't in the question set. There is also the opportunity, and I know it's probably quite difficult, but we could actually run the actual questions past real customers as well, if we did have enough engaged customers that were willing to do it. So in terms of moving forward, we're still obviously playing about with this and working on how we can maybe get this even more accurate. I think in terms of as a sector, it is kind of the big, early days in terms of this technology, but very, very exciting. I think there's something else I probably would like to mention as well at this point. It wasn't in the presentation, but it's using their own IP, so it all stays kind of the data locked within obviously ourselves and iLargo, which is who we work with. It doesn't go to train any further or larger language models. So in terms of any data that is shared, it is all kind of contained and locked down, which I know in terms of GDPR and things can be quite a concern. So just wanted to kind of put that out there as well.
iLargo.
iLargo was the particular company that we worked with. Yeah.
How do you spell that? Sorry.
So it's just I on its own .largo, LARGO.
Interesting.
And yeah, like I say, it was a free particular proof of concept, and I'm sure if people reach out and are interested in doing something similar, they'll be able to offer the same proof of concept as well.
Okay, I'll stop wittering on now and give everyone else a chance to ask you a question. So, first we've got Dean Harris, Director of Digital Data Technology at WHG. Dean, the questions just disappeared because someone else has asked a question. 1 second. How long did it take from engaging with a partner to having a digital twin available?
Good question. I think we were up and running. So from the initial conversations that we had with iLargo, it took about 3 weeks for us to get the twins up and running in terms of us being able to provide them with the input. So it was our customer charter. We wanted to make sure that we were happy with that before we shared it. We also wanted to kind of talk about how we're going to stress test the customer charter against these twins. So again, it took a little bit of time internally, just confirming those questions. But as soon as we sent that over to iLargo, the turnaround was really, really, really quick. I'd say within a couple of weeks that we had those twins set up, and then it was kind of the green light was, yeah, let's put the charter through it and let's get some responses.
Good stuff. Next question from Sarah O'Neill. Will we get a copy of these presentations? Yes, you will, Sarah. Apologies. Gary Jordan, just a comment. You have the twins saying firefighting repairs. This, I find, a management term. I would never have found this from a customer. Lou Woods, what number of customers would you need to run the question set by to further validate digital twin personas? I have a group of digitally confident customers in the Northeast who may assist, approximately 160 so far.
Oh, wow. Yeah. If people are willing to say work with us, would love to be able to kind of plug in to further customers to stress this further. In terms of us validating the results, I think it was about 50 customers that we went back to and got some kind of got those results back from. So yeah, the more we can kind of test this to make sure that we are happy with the technology and that it is giving us accurate results, then yeah, that'd be great to work with people if people are willing to obviously allow us to plug into their customers and bits.
Lou, just want to share your details on the chat for us to make sure we can connect you both.
Super, thank you.
Mark, question from you.
Hi, Mark Cantrell, editor of Housing Digital. That was fascinating and also potentially chilling. I'm actually getting shades of Minority Report. But my question kind of follows on from Joe, really. I was going to ask, I mean, like, digital twins, LLMs, as you mentioned, they all rely on the quality of the data they've got to use.
Absolutely.
So how would you go about maintaining and refreshing the data these personas are based on so that they don't go stale? And gathering that data, wouldn't that in effect itself become a resource burden on you that might undermine the advantages you're getting from this technology?
That's a great question. It was something that we asked right at the beginning about how do we keep these personas fresh. My brain is telling me I think it's every year they pretty much bin the personas and refresh them to keep them kind of updated in terms of what's really kind of finger on the pulse in terms of what customers and people are saying. Now that's something that iLargo would do for us. So in terms of a resource burden, thankfully that's not something myself or my team would have to do. And I think as well, akin to my point earlier, I think as you do that, we certainly want to start bringing in more of our data with the data that iLargo have got to try and really bespoke it more specifically to our customers. And it is a challenge that we've had back from board and CEC around how can we trust what's being said. So again, the previous question around stress testing this for us at the minute is one of the key kind of things that we will still want to work on. It's not that we've tested this once and off we go. We're perfectly happy to go down this particular path. I think that kind of the testing part's always got to be there. I think where I see the value though is just that speed at which we can kind of cut through some of the noise sometimes around when it comes to idea generation and the back and forth that we can sometimes have. I know on some of our recent projects, maybe we've got like 10 ideas we'd like to float past customers. We can actually kind of distill that down to maybe 4 and really use that time then with customers face to face on those 4 ideas that we feel from the twins are going to resonate with real customers better. So we are in an interesting space at the minute, particularly with AI. I certainly have reservations as well in terms of what the future holds, but I think as long as we keep the human in the loop, we've always got the human element there. That's the main thing. Like with all of this technology, it shouldn't be there to replace people, but it should be there as a bit of maybe a helping hand. And again, I'll go back to that statement at the end, technology where we can do things, but we definitely should always human where we should. And particularly with the work that we do, the human part is always the most important part.
Thanks for that.
Excellent. Thanks for your question, Mark. And if ever you ever worried about AI slop being an issue on Housing Digital articles, Mark's our editor, and you can see how much fear he has towards AI from that question. One last question from me, Steve, which I think would be a nice way to end it, maybe a bit of blue sky thinking for everyone to take away. Where else do you see this technology being applied across housing?
Yeah, I think the sky's the limit in a way. I mean, I alluded to already some of the bits that we're going to be using it for, particularly around our website. We've done some work already with customers on our website, but we found it quite difficult and to get kind of true responses from customers. We were almost prompting customers. So it were the customers' comments actually their true thoughts and feelings, or was it really we were steering them down a route that we thought? So that's something we want to use, and particularly around kind of accessibility on our website. Things like, is it easy to get to places on the website? Is it easy to understand? Easy to access? Language barrier? All of that kind of stuff. I think there's a lot there in that space that we can use the twins for. Already mentioned the corporate strategy, but I think when it comes to things like policy as well, and the impact that policy could potentially have on customers, I think it's just another avenue where it could maybe unlock some blind spots that we might not have considered when it comes to policy and how policy can impact what we're doing, even process and procedure. All that I think it's a really good vehicle to run by. And even again, going back to that blue sky thinking that you mentioned, thinking about the kind of the Clarion Customer of the Future report that Clarion did a while back, we could even potentially use this to think beyond our normal 3-year strategy and use it to think further ahead, which I know at the moment for us at Accent is something we're trying to do. We're certainly not there, but just try to go to beyond that kind of short-term thinking and go beyond that.
Indeed. Before we move on, we do have another question, which is quite a good question actually, from Beverly King, who's the VP of Client Partnerships at Alto Vita. Beverly asked, does a digital twin input for feedback and idea generation create a kind of bias versus non-digital competent, willing customers' input? So is it a bias between the non-digital competent and a willing customer's input? Just wondering if there's a difference in viewpoints. Is it prioritize etc. that might be less digital focused?
Yeah, I mean, there is a potential danger for bias. And I think, again, that's where the stress testing comes in. Again, we're still early in our kind of work on this to give a true reflection or answer on that. Probably in 6 months' time, I'll be better placed to answer that. But I think it's in our thinking at the moment. There's something that we always need to be aware of with this, that, how much of this response actually has bias built, because there's bias in everything that we do. Just in other forms of AI, there's bias there that there's subconsciously built into it. So yeah, it's something that we certainly need to be aware of. So yeah, good question.
Good stuff. Right, brilliant. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you very much.
Really, really thoughtful presentation. That's got me thinking.
Yeah,
definitely.
Super. Unfortunately, I can't stay for the panel at the end, so I just want to say again, if anyone wants to reach out, please feel free.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank
Please
you.
feel free to connect with Stephen. Happy to connect anybody on email or on LinkedIn or on the chat. Okay, we're going to wrap things up, I think. I'd like to thank Rachel, Pete, Steve and Kevin for sharing not just what they've achieved, but also the lessons they've learned along the way. I'd also like to thank our Housing Digital stakeholder partners for supporting today's event. I think today's presentations have demonstrated that digital transformation isn't simply about implementing new technology. It's about using technology, data, and innovation to create better experiences, make better decisions, and ultimately build stronger relationships with residents and communities. Hopefully, everyone watching leaves today with at least one practical idea they can take back to their own organisation. So thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to welcoming you to another Housing Digital event very soon. And I'll just take this opportunity just to mention the Housing Innovation Show, our 2-day conference and exhibition at the ICC in Birmingham City Centre on the 4th and 5th of February next year. Registrations open on the 1st of September. Do check those out. It's housinginnovationshow.co.uk. It is free to attend. I hope to see you all there. Other than that, thank everybody. Thanks to everybody who attended, and hopefully see you soon.